Good afternoon, everyone, for our session on community strategies and tactics, actionable community building techniques. Thank you for staying to watch our esteemed panelists on this topic. And I'll have each of them please introduce themselves, and then we'll start with the presentation.
Sure. My name is Debbie McGrath, and I'm the CEO of HR.com. For the last 12 years, I've founded the largest social network for human professionals, human resource professionals, with 194,000 members.
I'm Jordan Schwartz. I'm the president and founder of Passable. We provide online community services for events. Prior to that, I spent 10 years at Microsoft leading teams that built social products.
I'm James Ward. I work for NFI Studios. I'm the vice president of vertical market strategy and oversee new product development for continuing versions of our product. It's a white label social community for associations and for-profit organizations.
Thank you very much. And before we begin the panel, I want to remind everyone if that you have any questions for our panelists in our virtual audience, please use the Twitter hashtag VES180W as in dog. That also goes for our physical audience. If you're a little bit shy, please feel free to send in your questions that way. With that, let's go ahead and start the session. Thank you.
So we want to start the session, and the whole idea is to give everyone in the room and in our virtual audience some tactical takeaways on community building techniques. This goes without saying, these are some best practices, some ideas that we've seen in practice, in use, and in consulting with different organizations. That being said, keep in mind that this all starts by looking at the customer, looking at your member and why they interact with your organization, your company, your association. You can think about it like we're giving you best practices on how to start a turnkey manufacturing operation, but if the widget that you're manufacturing isn't valuable, then at the end of the day, you're going to fail before you begin. So keep that in mind when we're going through, and if anyone has any questions, there should be a microphone floating around. We'd be happy to enter in some two-way conversation as we move through.
So one of the things that we talk about is building excitement or momentum in a community. And if you have access to a superstar, an industry expert, someone like Dan Pink, who spoke earlier today, or pictures of Jack Welch or Malcolm Gladwell up here, there's the opportunity to bring them online for a specific period of time, only open maybe to some certain segment of your audience or membership base. So it could be for only VIPs, it could be a value add package that you have. But the value of an event or having somebody special online for just a specific period of time forces people to come to that community at a very specific time. You really need to emphasize the date, the time, the limited availability, the scarcity of it, and also go into denial. If it's sold out, you only want the first 250 premier members to get access to it, then you got to stick with that. So, but it's special to the people who participate. It's something that they get that other people may not get. So just one idea. We're going to go through 10 ideas in this quick panel. So
one of the things that we found is that choosing an internal champion is key to having a successful online community. I gave another talk yesterday as part of the PCMA series, asked everyone in the audience how many of them had a social media manager as part of their organization, and virtually every hand went up. And it really, I think it's become pretty obvious quickly that that role is a requirement. I assume that in both of your experience as well, you've seen that dedicating someone.
Teams of people.
Yeah, teams of people. And so the question is, what makes a good community manager? One of the first questions is it an internal person? Can you hire a third party? We have found that having somebody internal, someone who's willing, is key because they know the organization better. Whoever you choose as your internal champion, the person who's going to be running the project and making sure that the community is growing, will end up being the voice of your organization. And so if you don't trust them to be that voice and to carry the message of your organization and to speak for you, things aren't going to work. And so when you hire a third party, there's some dangers in there. I guess one of the top mistakes that I've seen made is to give it to the intern. And so they'll get someone internal, they say, okay, well, this Facebook stuff, I don't really get it, this Twitter stuff, I don't really get it, but that kid from college, I don't know, he always seems to have the Facebook up on his screen when he should be working, so maybe he gets it. And again, it's important to remember that whoever you assign to this role will be the voice of your organization to the world. They will be the face of your organization to the world. And so it's very important that it be somebody who's respected within your organization and within the community that you're trying to build. Of course, they need to get social media because there are some subtleties to how that works. And then finally, they need to allot time. And this kind of a frequent question and conversation that goes on. How much time? And is it, in your experience, is it a full-time job?
Well, we have actually 18 communities within HR.com, so something like a benefits community, a compensation community, and we have dedicated people for each of those communities.
That is their job, is to manage the community.
Yeah, and they got to live the talk, right? So they got to do the Twitter feeds, and they got to do the LinkedIn updates, and they got to publish content to the community, and they got to source content, and they got to find champions, and that's their whole job.
So one of the next items, and this is kind of the flip side of the coin from what Jordan pointed out. In our experience, we work with the organizations, the associations, the companies who launch these communities from the software that we provide them. One of the items that we've found very, very useful is that actually identifying those users from within inside of the membership, the specific customers that other people tend to gravitate towards, and actually incenting them in different ways to write white papers, to create discussions, to begin things inside of the community, to begin to draw other individuals. So I put in here, I put the picture of Mike Tyson, model behavior, right? But identify the different user types. So you have different types of users. The key here is to obviously focus on the influencers. If you think about it from an intranet standpoint for a corporation, typically those people that are going to draw the most attention are going to be the people who are higher up in the company. When they voice their opinion, other people want to listen to what's going on. And every type of organization, whether it's a membership-based organization or a customer-based organization, has a similar model in that there are people that have more gravitas, if you want to think of it that way, within any particular group. So finding them and chartering them to create activity or synergy inside of the community is key.
So if I can just add on to that, some of the principles of psychology of how people work is universal in a lot of ways. And the fact that there are communities that are online versus the communities that we exist in every day is almost immaterial to the basic concepts. And so I think one of these basic concepts is that everyone kind of wants to be cool, right? And no one wants to be embarrassed and to do the wrong thing. And there's an extra challenge when you're dealing with an online community because the cues that you use to figure out what you're supposed to do and what the norms of behavior aren't there. I mean, I walk into a room and I look around and I can see, are people laughing and slapping each other on the back, or are they kind of standing respectfully and waiting for each other to talk? I can look at how they're dressed. When you have an online community, all those cues are stripped away. And so it's very hard to know what the right behaviors are. And so recruiting these champions, they might be speakers, they might be leaders within the community, to demonstrate behavior can be a very powerful way to get the behaviors that you want, because it gives people the cues. And by using people they trust and that they respect, you play off that everybody wants to be cool thing. And so we've had a lot of success. We actually now encourage all of our customers to enter into the contracts with the speakers. You are required to post a question in the community, to be available to answer questions in the community, to have a profile in the community. And most of them don't mind. It shouldn't be, they like the exposure. But by making it explicit and by creating that expectation, you lead to success. So.
Yeah, I'd just like to add that if for every piece of content you publish, it takes typically 1,000 people to look at it before you get one comment or one rating. Okay, so most of the people who look at the content or participate in your community are very dormant and passive. So it's that 1% that actually do anything that actually help build the momentum and the content to the community. So you got to get a lot of people participating to get activity.
Yeah.
So plan an event. We're at a virtual event summit, sitting here in an actual event, which is kind of ironic. But the reality is events bring communities to action. So you can go to a community or an HR.com any single day of the week and get all the content and all the people and all the connections that you need. What makes it special is that if you go Tuesday at 1 o'clock, you've got a special event running where a whole bunch of your peers or similar minds are going to be online at the exact same time, and you can interact and chat together. The value of an event is tremendous for bringing people together. When you get masses of people together, you get more interaction, more chatter, more emails going back and forth, controversies coming up. It's just incredible what can happen. But people make the mistake of thinking that events, Tuesday at 1 it starts. It doesn't have to start Tuesday at 1. When people register for the event, you can start asking them questions then. Polls, surveys, ask them to participate, send questions in advance to start to build that community for the event in advance of the actual event. So, when I talk events, it could be just a webcast, it could be just an online chat with an industry expert, it could be a whole virtual event, it could be a series of webcasts. It doesn't really matter. It's a start and an end of an event that makes it important.
Yeah, I think in some ways it's similar to that sense of scarcity creates demand. And so by creating scarcity around the opportunity to interact, you make the desire to interact more attractive. It's the same reason Groupon is having such a great run at having these sales that expire at midnight. Why don't they just run them all the time? Because wouldn't it be great? You would sell more, right? No, but by making the coupon expire, the sale expire at midnight, it forces people to act, and it gives them a sense of urgency around it.
We do a lot of webcasts at HR.com. This year we'll do about 800 of them, and a lot of virtual events. We'll do about 80 of them. And what I find is, because frankly we don't produce the content, it's our members that produce the content. And I'm always amazed at how they don't use the chance of an event or an audience to create a survey or to create some buzz or excitement. You don't have to give away an iPod or a gift to get people to do it, but when you're doing a webcast, for example, like now, if we actually asked a question, everybody would tend to participate in that question. Yet, if we did it, just sent it out through an email, we'd have like a traditional 2% open rate, and we would get a very poor response to most surveys or questions. So when you have an engaged audience and you can show results and feedback instantaneously, you're going to get more valuable data that can be used for other market research. So whenever you're doing webcasts, virtual events, that always make sure your speakers and presenters are educated on the polling or questions, survey techniques that are involved, and give them back information or content that's valuable to them. So you could say something like the first 200 people who respond to this survey get into this event for free, or the first 200 people who respond to this survey get a free written copy of the executive summary. So you create some sense of urgency and scarcity to get people to participate and get you market research that otherwise you may spend a lot of money to figure out through another channel. So,
and I think it's a really good point that you can get valuable data from these surveys, but really that's only half of it. The other half is just getting people to participate. You've all been to those websites where it asks you some silly question about, what do you think of, I don't know, Sarah Palin, or what do you think of, the Super Bowl or something, and there's some poll there. You know what? They don't care about the results. Nobody looks at the results. The reason that they put that poll on there is because they know that people want to be heard, that people feel engaged by questions, and they're going to reach out and they're going to say, I've got to tell everyone what I think about football or politics. And it's a great tool to draw people into your community in the same way, honestly.
One of the other things that we've found with surveys is that typically people steer away towards like the click on the SurveyMonkey link and go take this 15-minute, 20-question, multiple-stage survey. People don't want to do that. We found that one of the really good ways to increase your penetration into your market is ask 2 questions and show them the 2 questions before they have to click on a link, right? So that they know exactly what they're getting into. They set the expectations on the amount of time that it's going to take and realize that it's a 2-question, 1-part answer each. It's going to take them 10 seconds. Really helps out a lot.
Okay, a controversial conversational topic. So in the HR space, this was probably the biggest news that hit our space in the last, well, I've been at HR.com for 12 years, and before that 10 years in another company. And when this article came out, it was on the cover of Fast Company, Why We Hate HR. If you can imagine the buzz in the industry that happened about HR professionals. They're in every organization. Why does everybody hate them? When you actually read the article, it wasn't that bad. It wasn't that negative towards HR people, but it got so much buzz and so much press that everyone had to contribute and comment and put something in. So I'm saying you need a catchy topic or a headline to draw people to your website. You need something controversial to get a lot of, if you want more than 1 out of 1,000 people who come to your website to participate, you got to have a catchy topic. Like if you put that topic in, you're going to have probably close to 50% put a comment in or something, or forward it virally to direct more people to your topic or to your webcast. So you need catchy topics.
Yeah. You know, it's funny. I don't know how many of us would feel comfortable posting as a topic, should my industry go away? What's the PR department going to say? They'll never let me do that. But it works. And the results that you get can be positive, even if the lead-off is negative. So maybe the lesson there is get Fast Company to write about how your industry is hated.
One thing I would add there, when dealing with content, you know, most associations or businesses in a community, you're going to post things, information, whatever it is. Take a bullet-pointed list of top something results. I kind of think about debate team back in 7th grade. You know, you learn how to argue something both ways, whether you know, lean one way or the other, right? Posting that content in a conversational manner by posting results and then automatically with that same bit of information kind of stirring the pot and saying that someone else disagrees with this and here's why is a more effective way to ignite that conversation rather than just posting the 10 bullet points, because then you have to, if you think about it, you have to have somebody go and view that, disagree with it, or agree with it strongly enough to say something about it before the next person says anything. And so the way, just to keep in mind, kind of the takeaway is think about the way that you're posting the content and how and where you're adding it inside of your community so that it actually goes to promote, you know, the overall objective on what you're looking to accomplish.
It's interesting too. I think in some ways what you're saying is lower the bar for participation, in that if you have just got a long 10 bullet point and you know you've this whole very structured argument, then in order for someone to respond to that, they really have to spend a lot of time crafting a 10 bullet response, and they're not going to do it. And so by lowering the bar for participation and having kind of micro points that you make, and you can engage more people because it's easier to engage. And maybe that's the way that you get that polls are effective too. That by allowing people to participate merely by checking a radio button, you lower the bar for participation and you're able to engage more people.
So the next one is leveraging multimedia. This is one of my favorite things to talk about. In terms of free solutions out there, everybody knows which ones they are: Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn and YouTube and all of these different components. The key here is to use those and point them back to your own wholly owned white label community where you control the information, you control the dialogue between your members. There's very simple ways to do this in Facebook pages, Facebook groups now, which was a new addition in the late portion of 2010. Twitter hashtags talking about different items that are going on, leveraging the executives or staff of your association or of your company to talk about different press releases and things that were done. The point is that you know that your members are using those free communities probably about 10 times more often than they're going to your website. And so use them as a casting platform so that when they go and log in on that dashboard, they're seeing that, you know, your association fan page is talking about different white label, or I'm sorry, different white papers that were added or discussions that are going on. This is a few stats. I'm sure you guys have seen a lot of these. 500 million users on Facebook, 250 million of them log in every day. This is a picture of my grandmother on her profile page. They literally put her on a jet ski with tennis shoes on, floated her out in the middle of the lake, took a picture of it so that she could add that as her profile page on Facebook. So if there's any question on whether people are actually using Facebook, I assure you your members, your customers are using these free platforms.
I mean, I guess to play devil's advocate, you were suggesting using Facebook and these other sources as a kind of lead gen tool or to drive people into a white label community. One of the questions that I often hear is, well, my users don't want to go create another profile on another network. So why not just use Facebook and LinkedIn as your community?
Well, you could do that. There's a few points to point out. Number one, if you use Facebook or some of the, say LinkedIn, for instance, as your network for your members, the problem is that it dilutes the value proposition of those components, whatever it is that you deliver to your members over time, because ultimately, at the end of the year, when you send them the email asking them to renew their membership dues, they technically don't have to renew their membership dues to remain a part of your different groups in these free platforms.
That's why you want them to use the white label community. And I can come up with, I mean, I produce a white label community too, so I know all the reasons that I want them to use it. But but if the users are saying, I don't want to use this because I've already got a profile on Facebook, then how do you address that? That
was bullet point number one. Bullet point number two would be that from a technology standpoint, members don't actually have to go out and recreate profiles. With APIs with either the database that you use or APIs with almost all of the free platforms that are out now, they can be automatically populated. So when your member logs in for the first time, the demographics, information that you want to populate on their profile page, how many years experience do they have, what's their title, what organization do they work for, if they have blonde hair or blue eyes, it doesn't really matter. You can populate that information automatically with the technology nowadays.
So one thing, we used to tie into to LinkedIn and draw in information in that way into the profiles that we created in our network, and we stopped doing it. And we did a kind of inventory of users. We went through, okay, let's take a look at 100 users and look at their profiles on LinkedIn and figure out which fields we're mapping over and how we map them over. And we found that, at least for the events that we were serving at the time, that the information, the way that they represented themselves in LinkedIn and in Facebook was different than the way that we thought they would want to represent themselves in the network. Right? I mean, Facebook's an easy one, right? You look at my interests on Facebook, I guarantee you they're not my interests that I want you all to know about here at the Virtual Edge Summit. And even LinkedIn, I was talking to Michael yesterday, and he was telling me that when he signed up for the PCMA, he added his LinkedIn profile to the LinkedIn event group, and then he looked at it, and it said that he was job hunting, and he was not job hunting. And that's kind of an embarrassing thing. So, I mean, I think it's somewhat an answer to my own question of why you would want separate communities, is because it allows people to represent themselves in different ways and establish different personas.
Right. Well, and again, your Facebook profile, I'm not going to friend any of you on Facebook. I assure you don't want to see my Facebook page, but you can have a one-way path of information. So the idea is that if someone follows your association on Facebook, the benefit to the association is that when they log in, they can see what you're talking about inside of your white label community. But if they click on that link, that doesn't mean that anybody inside of the association community can see what that person's Facebook page is doing. So again, you're using it as a casting platform, a marketing technique to bring people or more traffic to your wholly owned community where you control the content. And then second, the actual when you populate a community, most people are not doing an API with Facebook or Twitter or LinkedIn. They're doing an API actually with the database that the company has or the association has. So items that would more appropriately flow to an association community. So this is keep it simple, stupid. So we actually had a little bit of a talk before this, and I need to specify that this is about the user interface. There's not anything simple about launching a social community and getting your members to use it. It's a complex, constantly changing item where you have to be creative, and not everything that you do is going to be successful. But with that being said, you want to think about the vision on what you want your community to do. Think about those free platforms and what they're actually used for, engaging individuals, and choose the ones that work for you. So Twitter and YouTube and LinkedIn and Facebook, they all have different kind of mantras that go along with how people use them and what they're used for. Keep that in mind. People learn from what they already know. So, you talk about user interface in the software world. A lot of software companies have some really great ideas on how information should be completely restructured, but they don't bite those off and just leap there instantaneously. They take very small, methodical steps along the way, because you can't do algebra without learning how to do arithmetic first. And it's the same principle with learning new software. So share this key, make things easy, roll functionality out in stages. These things all go hand in hand. When you're launching a community, your overall vision or goal may be to have discussion forums, blogs, wikis, video integration, all of these different items, but at the end of the day, you don't want to launch it all at one time. It can be overwhelming. So roll it out in stages.
And it's not just that it's overwhelming for the users, which it can be, but it's also overwhelming for you. I mean, you, as the manager of all of this, you want metrics. You want to figure out what's working and what isn't.
You personalize it to maximize their experience, how to really make them feel special, how to make them feel they have to book today to do something, that it's scarce. If they don't do it soon, they won't get it. And you need to, you need to show people that they missed things if they didn't participate. They didn't come to this event, why don't they come virtually so that they come next year in person? So you really need to promote the urgency and scarcity of the products that you offer. So. I think.
Keep refreshing content. So let's say you've got people in the door. And everyone's going to come. They'll check this out once because you sent them an email. You integrate it with the registration process. How do you keep them coming back? And the strategy that has been established to be effective is to establish a rhythm of new content. And that rhythm may be different depending on what your organization is, what your audience is, how frequently you want people to come back. So for one group, it may be 3 times a day. There's some new blog post coming up. Another, it may be 3 times a month. But it is important to establish a rhythm around the content and be deliberate about that rhythm, what that rhythm will be. So when you're in your strategy session up front, you're all deciding what this is going to look like, where your investments are going to be explicit about how often you're going to be refreshing the content. And then up on the slide, we have some ideas for sources of those content. There's a online community around social media for event planners called Engage 365 that I'm a member of. It's free to join. If you go to, I think it's engage365.org, anyone can join it. And they do a really good job of recruiting luminaries in the field, many of them here today, to author guest blog posts, to be available, to engage in the Q&A that goes on with the general audience. It integrates Twitter feeds and other blog postings into the site in general. And it's been very effective. I mean, I've seen it is remarkable how that community in particular has created a 365-day-a-year engaged community.
There's nothing worse than going back to community and finding no new content. You know, you'll do it once, you do it twice, probably won't do it again.
It's it's demoralizing to the site, and it creates the perception that there's nothing going on, and nothing breeds success like success, and the opposite is true as well.
I think that's it, right, for our 10 tips?
Yeah.
Oh, feed the community. Sorry.
I'm just kidding. So last thing, and this kind of piggybacks off of the last slide, but some of the biggest mistakes I think that individuals take into consideration when they're trying to launch a community is they get this idea that it's going to be user-generated content. They're going to turn this engine on, and it's going to free up resources within inside of the organization. It's going to increase their market penetration, and all of these things are going to happen literally if we build it, they will come kind of mentality. Great movie, not the way it works. So keep in mind that this is something that it's energy begets motion, vice versa. Objects in motion tend to stay in motion. This is something that you have to constantly touch from 100 different angles with a lot of different great ideas. Something where content has to be updated. Things need to be new and refreshing. If you want to, kind of referencing one of the conversations earlier, somebody talked about how they launched a virtual event the first year, and they had a lot of people come because they were really curious about what that was like, but they felt like they didn't deliver on the actual content and the true quality of what they were looking to accomplish. And the second year, their rates declined because of it. And you can think about a social community in the same aspect, but the difference is that the downward turn is going to be reaped or felt much quicker because people, obviously, that motion, it all falls upon itself. So some best ideas or best practices there. Leverage your staff. Probably one of the most accessible points of contact that you have to keeping things going inside of the community is not only your community manager, but get your sales people in there, get your customer service people in there, get your education people in there, and make it so that 30 minutes a week they have to go in there and do some sort of interaction with customers or with members or go in and add things. It shouldn't all fall to one person's shoulders. So try and leverage as many resources, and this is something where you can get really creative, but the more activity that you can put into it from your perspective, the more you're going to get out of it from the people you expect to go there, your customers or members.
I saw on Twitter earlier today on the hashtag for this conference, someone was asking about the virtual community that is for this conference, and asking if the staff, asking that the staff had some special mark, and they didn't, and so it was hard to know who was staff and who wasn't. And it really, I think that there's at least two values to that. One is if I have a question, I know who I can ask, or if someone is issuing information, I know, are they an authority? Are they telling me that lunch has moved because they know it or they've heard it? But there's also something emotional to it. I know when I walk through the crowds here and I see the blue shirts or however the staff here has marked themselves, that there's a sense of being attended to and watched and get all mushy, but cared for by the organization. And I think we neglect to do that in the online community. Mm-hmm. And so I think there is a good lesson there.
Well, the catalyst here is just the simple fact that we know that members aren't making it to in-person events. They're not making it to in-person networking events like they used to. And one of the biggest value propositions that associations bring to the table is just that. And so it's a changing paradigm in the way that you have to deliver value to your membership. It's not for everyone, but it's not that, and it's also not that they only want that virtual presence. They want both. They want the interaction between the association and the interaction between the other members. The item is that they may just have to get that virtually. So the more that you can provide that from your staff point of view, the better off you'll be.
So we're at the end of the presentation. We'll take questions now from the audience or from the virtual Twitter feed.
And as an incentive, Jordan is I believe, a hobby beekeeper. And so the first person who asks a question, whether in our audience here at Las Vegas or online, gets a jar of his sweet honey. So I hope that's an incentive. And
We got a question in the back. Yeah. Yeah. Can we get a mic out? Sorry. For the virtual audience, the entire internet also wants to hear you.
Okay. I was wondering, I work for a convention center, and I was wondering if you guys have any tips on how to exactly build a community around a convention center, which, I mean, our strategy so far has been to just kind of go after what we've seen from larger convention centers like Vancouver and Melbourne, which they talk about the events that they're holding. And then, of course, we also have a mall, so we have events there, and we talk about those events, but obviously the people that are interested in this are not really from a community, and they're all interested in very, very different things. And so I was wondering if you have any suggestions on that. I mean, how do you bring together these people that, for the most part, they're going to be interested in your one event that you talk about, and then they're not really interested in anything else that you have to say?
Right.
So.
It's a great question, and I think I have two thoughts initially, and of course share it. One is that the idea of community implies that there's some kind of dialogue and interaction N-way between all of the different members, and that may not be your goal. I mean, it would be great if you can get that engagement, but if your goal is broadcasting information to a listening audience about the information regarding and to promote the convention center, then you may not need a community per se. Now, that said, I do think that a community, if you can get it active, will create a level of engagement that's much more valuable than just having a receptive broadcast audience. And so for that, I would say start with what do they want. If you're not solving a problem for your users or your customers, you're not going to get any of their time. So identify what their problems are, and then look for ways that the community can help solve them. So are there budget issues, or are there process issues that are involved that all of your customers share, for example? And then is there some way that creating a dialogue around those issues can help them solve it? And so if you're creating a way for them to solve problems that they really have, everything else will flow. I don't know.
Well, you could also rework your definition of your community to include just not the conference center, but also the stores and the businesses around it that benefit from the convention center being there. So, you know, when somebody comes into a convention, they can get a look at all the other aspects of the things that they could do around there through one interface, which I think would add a lot of value to people.
Yeah, I think that, Jordan, you kind of hit on it. Why do your customers choose you over someone else? What are all of those individual, value components, those value add things that you bring to the table? And those are the things you want represented in the community. You can also kind of rework your expectations of the community instead of to be, creating these in-depth conversations to really be about prolonged engagement of your customers. So I would imagine that a lot of your customers that maybe come for a conference one year, they make a plan or plan to do that once every 5 years or once every 10 years. So a community can have different objectives. It can be to increase your brand awareness, but it can also, and this is kind of more in the consumer products goods area, they use it to really engage their current customers to be loyal followers of their brand.
And I'll get your card afterwards and get you that jar of honey. Are there other questions?
So I think now we all get to go to the Hard Rock Cafe, and the virtual audience can drink as much as they want at home, and nobody else will report that they've done that. Thanks for participating.
Thank you all.